Good evening. And in the last sessions, we discussed what is bodhicitta, what is bodhisattva charita avatara, the way of the bodhisattva, all about, and what is bodhicitta, the relative bodhicitta and the ultimate bodhicitta, and in order to actualize the ultimate or the absolute bodhicitta, we begin by taking the relative bodhisattva vow or generating the relative bodhicitta. And the relative bodhicitta is bodhicitta of aspiring and bodhicitta of entering. And in order to generate bodhicitta, one needs to prepare, because bodhicitta can take birth, or you can sow the seed of bodhicitta in a good ground, having all the harmonious causes and conditions. So in order to do that, then there's these 8 different kinds of practices. Making offering as an antidote for desire or attachment. Prostration as antidote for pride. Taking refuge, which is the foundation of the Buddhist path. So no matter whichever form of Buddhist path you take, you need to take refuge. So it is the foundation. Without taking refuge, you cannot receive any kind of Buddhist precepts or vows. And refuge, basically, the ultimate refuge is to, in the refuge, what we basically do is the ultimate refuge is innately present within our being, so within our mind stream. So as long as we have the Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, we have the ultimate refuge. So when we take refuge, it is a way of confirming or reaffirming that we are Buddha, and the realization of the Buddha is the Dharma, and Buddha also embodies the Sangha. So the ultimate object of refuge basically is the Buddha, and there's the relative refuge, the temporary refuge, or the causal refuge, or taking refuge in the object of refuge, in those in whom the realization has occurred, such as the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, and thus the teachings, especially the realization, the wisdom and the knowledge of Shakyamuni Buddha, and the Sangha, the enlightened bodhisattvas, arahats, who have reached to a higher level of realization of truth. And through that, we make a commitment or the pledge or the firm resolve to attain Buddhahood oneself. And that generating the firm determination or making a firm resolve to attain Buddhahood ultimately for oneself and others, for the benefit of oneself and others, is the called the resultant refuge. And this is very important because ultimately the ultimate object of refuge is the Buddha. And the Buddha is no other than your actualization of the Buddha nature within, which is free from, or in other words, which is endowed with the twofold purity. The purity of the basic purity, that innate purity of the Tathagata Garbha. So the defilements and the obstacles, the obscurations are temporary. And through the practice of applying the path and the method, then you get rid of the temporary veils and obscurations. And when you actualize, then you attain freedom from the temporary obstacles and obscurations. So that's why it's the innate purity and the temporal purity. So that state, when you attain that state, then you attain the state of Buddhahood, and that is the ultimate absolute refuge. And then confession. So confession of defilements and negative actions. In order to, because negative actions, the defilements, they obscure or they bury the truth, basically, the absolute bodhicitta. So in order to purify that, that is the practice of confession and purification. And what we need to understand here is when we talk about confession and purification, it's not that we have a truly existing kind of negative actions, the negative karma we have. It's not like that. Our basic nature is pure, perfect, and it's never been tainted by impurities of negative actions. For all these negative actions, negative thoughts, dualistic clinging, wrong attitudes, these are temporary. So they can be purified through the right understanding of the view and applying the method that is in accordance with, or that syncs with the view, the understanding of the view. So that is with that kind of confidence, you need to do the purification and confession. It's not that you are like primordially you are a sinner. It's not like that. In Buddhism, it doesn't work like that. Then rejoicing in the good actions of oneself and others. Requesting the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to remain without passing into nirvana and turn the wheel of dharma according to the intellectual capacities of different individual beings, such as the three yanas, Sharvaka yana, Pratika Buddha yana, and the Bodhisattva yana. And then dedicating the merit. It is very important to dedicate the merit. One of the most important practice in the Buddhist practice. So no matter how small your good action, good thoughts and action, virtuous action, thoughts and action may look like, if you can anoint that with the bodhicitta, the aspiration to awaken all beings, to enlighten all beings, and apply even an intellectual, even the intellectual, just like even a mere intellectual understanding of the truth of non-duality, emptiness, and in the end, you dedicate without hope or expectation for the enlightenment of all beings, then it means that you have saved, you have deposited your merit in a Swiss bank. Nobody can take it out. Otherwise, in the following chapter, it comes that, as strong emotions, merit that is not sealed with bodhicitta or dedication can be destroyed in an instant of strong anger. So that kind of danger or risk is there. So in order to protect or secure from such dangers, then you need to dedicate the merit. That is one important thing. So usually when we do the practice, if you do the practice, then you take refuge. Basically, refuge, you don't have to take refuge like praying to God. You take the inspiration. Siddhartha Gautama, he was born as an ordinary, normal human being. So he practiced the path and he attained Buddhahood. And he also succeeded in inspiring, infinite beings, other beings. So you take the inspiration. And taking the inspiration is, you have some kind of a confidence in the Buddha, that Buddha is enlightened and Buddha can benefit, bring temporary and ultimate benefit. That alone is taking refuge. You don't even have to chant prayer. Dharma, when you take refuge in Dharma, you have to practice. There's no other way. You have to practice. So what is proper, what is improper, what is virtuous, what is non-virtuous, you have to follow that and you have to practice. You have to do the meditation practice, you have to do other practices, you have to understand the view, and you need to apply your understanding of the view into practice so that you actualize your understanding of truth. That is taking refuge in Dharma. And Sangha, you may have doubts, you're not sure, you're not fully confident. You need the advice and support of those who know that, those who have practiced that, those who have experienced that. So being open to ask questions and take the advice of those who know about the path, that is taking refuge in Sangha. So you don't really have to go with folded hands, It's not necessary. But actually, after some time, once you get used to, because what is disallowing, allowing us to, not allowing us to do that, is our habit, our defilements, our emotions. As you go on practicing and then accumulating merit and purifying the defilements, then your mind will become more clear, more open. And then even if you don't want, your mind will force you to fold hands when you see the statue of Buddha. That will happen automatically. But in the beginning, you need to start, as I explained now. So that is taking refuge. And then actually taking the bodhisattva vow or generating bodhicitta. So once you take refuge, you generate the bodhicitta. Whatever you do, study, contemplation, meditation, practice, social work, social services, whatever you do, may this become a cause for the complete freedom of all beings from the fears of samsara, suffering. Basically, so many different kinds of suffering. Suffering upon suffering, suffering of change, all pervasive suffering. The biggest challenge we have is we don't accept the third suffering. We don't accept. We accept to a certain extent the first two sufferings. Okay, suffering and suffering upon suffering is too much, is too overwhelming. So we accept that. We have, we are sick, and in that, then you have like a, financial crisis and so on, family problems. These are very small, but compared to the kind of suffering, the intensity of suffering in the other form of beings, the other form of life have, like animals, their suffering is manifold compared to our suffering. But in order to really give rise to this renunciation or the longing to know the truth, because knowing the truth is freedom from suffering. That's you have to be, you have to believe in that. Without knowing the truth, according to Buddha's teachings, you cannot be free from samsara. You cannot cut the root of the samsara, root of suffering, because suffering is rooted in the misunderstanding of the truth. That is ignorance, and that gives birth to different kinds of, gross and subtle emotions, and they bring action, and action brings rebirth. Rebirth means suffering. That's according to the first turning of the wheel of teachings, the Four Noble Truths teachings. So anyway, you generate the bodhicitta. Okay, when you generate the bodhicitta, the bodhicitta of aspiring and entry. First, you generate, then taking the, as much as possible, you need to take the bodhisattva vow from a qualified Mahayana teacher, bodhisattva teacher who has received the bodhisattva vow, maintain the bodhisattva vow purely, and has the unbroken lineage of this bodhisattva vow, which is very important because we believe in the continuity. And that the teacher, the medium through which you receive or you generate, with whose support you generate the bodhicitta, is kind of a medium, middle person. But your actual witness are the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, enlightened teachers, gurus of the past, present, and the future. So in front of them, you generate the bodhicitta. First, you take refuge by chanting the refuge prayer 3 times. Then take the bodhisattva and then the bodhicitta of generate the bodhicitta of aspiring, and having generate the aspiration bodhicitta, you make a commitment, because just by making a plan, just by aspiring, you don't get to do things. You don't accomplish things just by thinking that I'm going to do that. So you need to actually make a commitment and then do it. So that is the, entering bodhicitta. So through that, then one day you will have a direct contact with the ultimate bodhicitta. So after taking the bodhicitta, bodhisattva vow, and it is said in the teachings that uh, it is important to generate bodhicitta. More important is to really give birth to the bodhicitta. So in other words, that bodhicitta takes root in your mind stream, in your being. So for that, you need to nurture, you need to maintain, you need to sustain. So how do you do that? By keeping the precepts. Because when you take the bodhisattva vow, you take a precept. So precept means you have a commitment. So you need to keep the precepts once you take them. So you have to maintain the precepts in order to nurture the bodhicitta. Because bodhicitta is the essence, like a precious jewel. And in order to hold that, you need the precepts. Precept is a vessel to hold the bodhicitta. If you break the vessel, the jewel will fall down. And then you might lose it as well. So how to keep the body, how to maintain the bodhicitta, how to keep the precepts. The most important thing is to practice. There are two more important methods or the practice which will enable you to keep the precepts. One is mindfulness, being mindful, being aware. And another one is the vigilance or introspection. So mindfulness, what is mindfulness? By definition, mindfulness is the being very careful and aware of what is good and bad. You need to understand, first know that what is good, what is bad, what can be adopted, what can be rejected once you take the vow. So there are three precepts. Basically, there are three precepts in the Mahayana, in a vow. So one is refraining from harming others, physically or mentally. And second is to gather the virtues. So gather the virtuous thoughts and actions. And third precept is to engage in the practice of helping others. Because the most important project of a bodhisattva is to enlighten other beings. So without working and helping other beings, a bodhisattva cannot accomplish his or her mission. So there are three. So the first one is more important. First, one needs to keep the precepts for oneself in order to help others. If one's mind is not tamed, then one cannot help others tame their mind. So first, one needs to train in being aware. Being aware is not just sitting and watching the mind. If you can do it all the time, that is fine. But for beginners, it is difficult. It is difficult. You're working. You have to work. You have to do the activities. So we need to always remind ourselves of how is my state of mind first. First, what is good and what is virtue. So anything that comes from negative emotions such as anger, jealousy, aggression, desire, any action that comes from these negative emotions is negative karma, negative action, is non-virtuous. So anything that comes from understanding, renunciation, wishing happiness for oneself and others, wishing to see the truth, compassion, loving kindness, intention to help others in whatever way one can, that is the virtuous action. So we need to first inform about what is virtuous and what is non-virtuous. And then the main culprit in there is the emotions. So we really need to first examine the emotions and analyze, and need to be aware, and really need to see the emotions. If you can't see the emotions, the negative emotions as negative, then it will be hard for you to believe the actions created by negative emotions as being negative. So first we need to really train in knowing what is good, what is bad, what is virtuous, what is non-virtuous, what is in harmony with the path that nurtures your bodhicitta. So that is the virtues. And when we talk about emotions, okay, negative emotions, positive emotion, negative emotions, emotions actually, that delusions basically is the first step, beginning. The emotions is not the nature of mind. So it is temporary. It has arisen. The emotions have arisen from causes and conditions. For example, attachment, love, and hatred is a result of the causes and conditions, such as the enemies and relatives and so on. And these emotions, they don't exist as an independent phenomena outside of your own projection, outside of your own confused mind. So it's just the creation of your confused mind. And if you really examine and analyze, they don't have true nature. They don't have independent true entity, these emotions. So when you know that, that's why study is important, contemplation is important, analysis is important, not just meditation. If you have unconditional kind of, as I mentioned earlier, if you have unconditional kind of unwavering, non-regressive devotion to the truth, to the teachings, to the teacher, to the Sangha, that's fine, then you can proceed on. But we don't have that. An even bigger challenge we have is we are educated. Our mind is really, really conditioned by the so-called education. So we are intellectuals, Chandrakirti, one of the most celebrated masters, of the middle way philosophy. He categorizes the vessel or the people to whom the truth can be taught. There are three. First, those who have uh, already laid the foundation in their previous life, heard the teachings and practiced to a certain extent, and made connection to the truth, the teachings on truth. To them, truth can be taught directly. Because when they hear the truth, when such people hear the truth, they develop immense joy and happiness. And because of that, as a result of that, they have goosebumps and tears in their eyes and so on. So they really boost their confidence in the truth. There's one kind of, we are not that. When we hear truth, anything happens, nothing happens. Even I don't have, I didn't seem to feel anything. I've studied for 20 years of these teachings. Still, I don't feel anything. It's completely blunt. And the second kind of, the most kind of innocent, naive audience. So for them, you cannot use logic. Logic is too complicated. So through the training, through the progressive stages of training the mind, in talking about that renunciation and slowly introducing the truth. And we fall into the category of the third one, the intellectuals, theoreticians. You have to use the strongest and the best possible logic to convince that audience about the truth. So that's why study is important, because we are not convinced. We are not convinced easily, because we have reasons. We have logic. When somebody says something, we question why, what, where, when. So many questions, endless questions. So through study, you need to analyze, examine and analyze the origin of the emotions. What is emotion? Where is it found? Is it nowhere? If you really, it's just temporary, it's fleeting, advantageous. So through that, you gain confidence that emotions and negative actions can be destroyed. You can uproot. They can be uprooted. Shantideva gives a very good analogy here. There's a kind of a. He says, for example, for the practitioner, like a bodhisattva, emotions, negative emotions are enemies. So the most dreadful enemy of a practitioner, the meditator, bodhisattva, who is following the bodhisattva path, is emotions. Because emotions are the direct cause of the breakage of vows. So if you break the vow, then you cannot nurture your bodhisattva vow. The bodhicitta, the relative bodhicitta. So, like for example, the outer enemies, once they are defeated and thrown out, that enemy can go somewhere else gather the troops and become very strong and come back and fight and defeat you. But this, the enemy of negative emotions are not like that. Afflictive emotions are not like that. Because in the first place, they don't exist. They don't have a grounding. They're not the truth. It's not the nature of your mind. They are not found outside. If you think that the emotion is found outside, where? In the object? For example, instant anger. Anger is caused by the so-called enemy, okay? Your opponent. So where? In the body, in the mind? You need to analyze. So it's found nowhere. So the emotion cannot gather. Once defeated, through your defeated by your wisdom of knowing the truth, they cannot gather back. They're completely destroyed because they're rootless. They don't have root. The emotions don't have root. They don't have the ground. So they are temporary, and it is just your own creation, the mind's own creation. So once you understand the mind, emotions disappear. Since there is no basis, they cannot arise again. So, knowing that, what you need to do is to apply your diligence. You should apply your diligence. Without diligence, you cannot accomplish your task. It is said in the Madhyamika Avatar, Introduction to the Middle Way, Chandagiri says that all the good qualities and knowledge and realization follow diligence. So without diligence, enlightenment is impossible. Victory from emotions is impossible. So diligence. So you apply diligence. And again, when you practice the path, the antidote for your antidote for the emotions that cause the breakage of the vow, your precept, then you also need to reflect on how much time we have. We hardly remember this impermanence, first of all, impermanence. So it is very important to remember and reflect on the impermanence. So remind of the, nothing is certain. There is no guarantee that you will live for these many years and then you will be able to accomplish your practice. No, there's no guarantee. And after that, there's also no guarantee that if you have not accumulated enough of the causes and conditions that will bring the kind of birth, the support you need to generate bodhicitta, to sow the seed of bodhicitta. It is difficult. In the beginning, Shantideva says, for instance, the virtuous mind, the virtuous thought, it is like just a flash of lightning in the middle of the dark, cloudy night. So it doesn't happen very often. It happens once in 100 years, maybe, sometimes. So it's rare, difficult. In human body endowed with all the favorable causes and conditions, freedom and riches, it is also difficult. In the meditation session, Tashi mentioned about the analogy, the example, how rare it is to obtain this precious human body endowed with freedom and riches. It's like a blind turtle whose head gets into the hole of a yoke, being carried over here and there, the waves in the ocean, the blind turtle. And it is said in the teachings that human birth, having all these causes and conditions, freedom and riches, even rarer than that. Not just like that, it's rarer than this. So this kind of, these are not like a theistic kind of practice. These are all to remind us, to boost our diligence to do the practice. So these are all actually, in the end, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the wisdom part tomorrow. So, the 9th chapter is like the quintessence of the Bodhicharya Avatara, and it is the most difficult chapter. And it talks about how to generate wisdom. And in order to generate wisdom, we need to understand the view, the truth. So in the beginning, Shantideva says that all these practices, the benefit of the excellence of bodhicitta, confession, taking the bodhisattva vow, being mindful, being vigilant, practicing the patience, and applying diligence, doing meditation, like Tonglen practice, walking meditation, all this, the 6 paramitas and so on, these are just to support the birth of wisdom, the birth of transcendental wisdom, the wisdom that cuts through our limitations of dualistic clinging, dualistic confusion. So there's so many details. You can read actually the commentary. It's too long. So in order to keep the precept, you need to know what is the precept, a bodhisattva precept. For example, if you take a monk or nun's vow, Vinaya vow, Pratimoksha vow we call it, there are 3 different kinds of vow. The first vow is the Pratimoksha vow. The vow of individual liberation is called Vinaya vow. And there, there are 53 vows, precepts that a fully ordained monk takes. And for a nun, it's like 360, I think. So a little bit different. So likewise, in the bodhisattva vow, once you take the bodhisattva vow, ritually, then there are 14 or 18 main vows, the root vows. I'll just mention 1 or 2. For example, it is categorized as, easier for the kings and the rulers to commit, and easier for the ministers and the around to commit, and easier for the general, the subjects to commit. So, for instance, if you forcefully make a follower of the Sarvakayana school, Sarvakayana path, to give up the Sarvakayana path and make that person to take the Bodhisattvayana path, you break the vow. You break the vow, Bodhisattva vow. You can't do that. You can inspire through teachings, but you cannot forcefully convert the other person to the bodhisattvayana path. And there are 18 of that, as mentioned in the Akashagarbha Sutra. So if any of this, if you happen to commit any of these 18 downfalls, root downfalls, then you need to confess then and there. The best is to take the bodhisattva vow again. So, for example, again, the one that is easier for that, the ordinary people to commit is if a teacher teaches the view of emptiness, shunyata, prajnaparamita, to a person who is not ready for that, then you break the bodhisattva vow. So there's the elaborate precept, because there's and then the medium kind of precept is taking therefore actually as in the, and then since we don't have time, I'm not going to go into the detail here. Then at the very least, you shouldn't give up the bodhisattva vow of aspiring. Your wish, intention, your interest, enthusiasm, and longing to get enlightened, to attain Buddhahood, you shouldn't give up that. If you give up that, then your bodhisattva vow will crash down completely, will crash and fall down completely. So, in the teaching it is said that because since we are ordinary, we have emotions, negative habits. Maybe sometimes we forget the beings, other beings, but you cannot forget your wish to become Buddha. If you forget and if you give up your wish to become Buddha, then you break your vow. So, but you can again, with the regret, you can confess. These are also again not how to say, it's not fixed, it's not truly existing thing. So you can confess and purify. That's the whole point of purification and confession. You can do it, but not committing is better, as it is that prevention is better than cure. Yes. So as the in the vigilance part, in the vigilance or the introspection part, so in order to keep the vow, in order to maintain the vow, you need to guard your mind. So in order to guard the mind, you need to introspect and be vigilant about the state of your mind. Whether your mind is in a virtuous state, non-virtuous state, neutral state, you need to keep watch over your mind all the time. And you need to guard from the negativities. Guard your mind from giving birth to or giving rise to negative emotions, afflictive emotions, so to speak. So that is the vigilance, basically. So if you don't practice mindfulness and vigilance, if you don't have mindfulness, vigilance, however much practice you do, it will be difficult to attain the result swiftly, without obstacles, so without taking time. So all the virtuous things is they come from, and Shantideva says here, Samsung tujuk matokpa tujuk mangbo jiji. Actually, the best kind of discipline, and we practice, in many wisdom traditions, they also practice like austerities, penance. So, of all these austerities and penance and difficult practices, the practice to guard your mind from ego clinging, negative emotions, afflictive emotions, is the one you need to adopt. That practice, that penance, or that discipline. Other than that, the other forms of disciplines, they cannot bring, the fruit from those kind of, uh, the benefit from those kind of discipline is not so much. It's very minimal unless you guard your mind. So all these practices, like the aspiring, the entering bodhicitta practices, such as the six paramitas, these are actually the mind, not body, the physical practice, according to Shantideva. Like generosity, for instance, the six parameters. That's generosity, for instance, is the intention to give without expecting anything in return. So you don't expect anything in return or result. So you don't expect a result. And the intention to give everything, your own body, your wealth, your belonging, basically, and even the merit you have accumulated for the benefit of others. So that is uh, the the generosity. So basically, it is the mind. So basically, what is happening when you practice generosity is trying to decrease the your attachment, self-clinging. Basically, these are more doable than completely trying to get rid of self-clinging. It's more subtle, the self-clinging. So we begin with the outer things, outer, more tangible things. Ego clinging is not tangible, it's very subtle. So you begin with the uh, physical and more kind of tangible, gross things. So you begin with the generosity, being generous with your belongings, like wealth. Then trying to help other beings be free from fears, like temporary fears, ultimate fear. That is also one kind of giving, transcendent giving. And sharing knowledge of truth, as I mentioned other day, is also transcendent giving. And discipline is also mind. Intention to give up harming others. So, in other words, refraining from harming others is discipline. And patience is also mind. Patience is to be able to withstand that confidence, or that confidence to withstand any kind of adversities, outer adversities, inner adversities. That is the patience. And not wanting to, having the confidence not to retaliate, so harm others in return for the harm caused upon you. So that is the patience. Again, patience, many different kinds of patience. One of the most important patience is to be able to resist truth. As I mentioned earlier, truth is not that easily digestible, especially the emptiness, the shunyata. The shunyata is the truth of shunyata is not easily digestible. It's very kind of a scary truth, because when you really, if you really understand shunyata, then it is like, you don't have any root at all where you can base upon. So you don't have a base. You become a free. That's why in uh, because when we talk about birth and death and rebirth, there's one state where you become really free. You're not grounded, and that's where if you are not informed and if you're not used to that, then you are affected by fear. So that kind of truth is not that easy. So being able to resist the truth is also one kind of uh, patience. And diligence, as I said, is joy in doing virtuous things. So joy in virtue is the diligence. Meditation is being able to control yourself, mentally control yourself. So have control over your mind, whether to let it go out or to keep it here itself without letting it wander here and there. So, in other words, having that mental authority to not to let your mind get displaced, basically. That is the concentration, meditative concentration. And prajna, or the wisdom, is to know the secret of one's mind, basically. The secret of one's mind is the true nature of the mind, the innate nature of the mind. So the true nature of the mind is luminous, clear in nature. So luminous in nature, clarity, and it is empty in nature. So it is unborn, beyond birth and death. So to know that kind of secret of the mind is the wisdom, the, the subject that knows that is the wisdom or the prajna. So I'll stop here, and if you have some questions, one or two questions, you can ask. Yeah.
Kempula, I'm in some ways taking a step back because the answers to the dilemma that I want to put forth to you, you have already taught us. But I still want to put this dilemma forth to you. Um, when it comes to emotions, I find that uh, I get stuck either in giving importance to the cause of the emotion. So I want to in a way, fix samsara, fix the physical world which provokes or catalyzes my emotion. Or if I'm not doing that, then I tend to give too much importance to my emotion or my feeling. There is this need to address one's feeling or emotions. So, between those two, or a combination of those two, uh, I'm sort of stuck in a monkey dance. So, I'd like to uh, ask you what you feel about this dilemma.
I think practically, I don't know. I have never done that. So I might have experienced, but I don't know. It might have gone away because since it is impermanent. But I think according to the text here, so you need to understand the emotions basically. So only through understanding then you can resolve that issue. So you will never get stuck. Like understand what is the root of emotion. So the root of emotion, if you really examine, there's no root. Emotion doesn't have root. You don't find emotions in the object you examine. But you need to do some kind of contemplation, I think, analytical meditation in order to. But it doesn't come easily though. It takes time, you know. It takes time, so you need to get habituated because practice is all about reversing or transforming the habit. So when you get stuck, then you can do that contemplation of saying that where is this emotion coming from? Is the emotion coming from that object? Then you can examine from which object, from the uh, I have forgotten that word actually. Uh, animate and inanimate. I think animate and inanimate object. Inanimate object, there's no connection anyway. Emotions is your mind, consciousness, yes. Emotion is mind. So with the inanimate object, no connection at all. It doesn't make sense. And animate, from where? Past mind, future mind, present mind. I think if you can do that, I think even before you have finished half of that, that will go away. And you need to celebrate that, but without getting attached, fixated on that. You just celebrate and let it pass. And then another emotion comes, you do that and let it pass. You have to do like that, I think. It's doing like meditation. When emotions arise, just watch and don't do anything because they will go away naturally. So you can only do that, I think. But I think we also need to have to be informed and be aware about our some kind of hope and fear, expectations, and so on. Sometimes they can be really, how would I say? They can become a really, uh, really a netted kind of chain. So I think that's all I can say for the moment. We all get stuck in one way or other, I think, in that kind of situation. But we need to inform that samsara cannot be fixed. That's it. Because samsara does not exist, truly exist. So that's why you cannot fix. If it is truly existing, you cannot fix. If it is not truly existing, you cannot fix.
Is there a difference between the path uh, of a bodhisattva or bodhisattvayana and the path to enlightenment, or are they one and the same?
No, actually, the Chandrakirti, he talks about three different kinds of enlightenment. First is the enlightenment of Sharvaka, and second, the medium Buddha. They are called medium Buddha, Pratika Buddha, and the enlightenment of a Buddha. So the Bodhisattva path is the path that leads to the enlightenment of Buddhahood, the complete, full Buddhahood. But Sharvakayana path, according to the Mahayana, you can, one can attain liberation, nirvana, free from suffering and the cause of suffering. That one can attain nirvana. Interestingly, Buddhahood is beyond samsara and nirvana. That is the difference.
Helping others, whereas if one only is concerned of one's own enlightenment, then maybe it's very easy.
It is supposed to be easy. That's why it's Mahayana. You have to, your confidence and courage has to be brought. You have to really courageous to be able to have that kind of intention and ability to help others. Yeah, there's 7 points which makes the Mahayana greater, because the result is also, and it takes long time. It takes 3 countless years at the very least. That path, to attain nirvana, if you do it strictly and then honestly, 3 lifetimes you go away from samsara. You're freed from samsara completely. But it takes 3 countless eons to reach that state. And then also, you have to give up your body and so on for bodhisattvas. It's difficult. But for a bodhisattva, enlightened bodhisattva, even the unenlightened bodhisattva, according to Chandrakirti, is not that difficult. Because when you chop off your body and give it to others, if you have really generated your bodhicitta, compassion and so on, then through that suffering, you can understand the suffering of others, and then more compassion is generated, according to Chandrakirti. And for the first Bhumi Bodhisattva, there's no duality. Since there is no duality, then if your body has been chopped off, like if one of your limbs has been chopped off, it's not been chopped off because there was nothing to chop off. So there's that difference, yes.
We all have to live with our past. This life, previous lives, not for ordinary people like me and others, is diligent meditative state a start to the process built with some inbuilt compassion. How does one start the process of delinking from the past of this life, earlier lives? You have to make a start.
Okay, one thing in Buddhism, we believe that the fact that you are able to hear these teachings and kind of connect yourself to your potential, innate potential, is because of your good actions, thoughts and actions you have brought, forward from your past lives. So then there could be negative actions that if you don't remember, then you don't remember, you can confess and purify, you can do that. So there's not much to do about, you shouldn't dwell in the past too much. It is an obstacle. So in order to take forward, whatever you can do now, the studies you are doing, the contemplation you are doing, then as much as you possible, you can generate compassion, you can do your meditation, and you shouldn't expect the result so much, because expectation also brings suffering, dissatisfaction, because not every expectation can be met. You cannot accomplish in every expectation. So whatever you are doing now, you can go and do it. If you can do the meditation for half an hour a day, broken up into small sessions. If you can do that, then as I said, you can dedicate the merit for the enlightenment of yourself and all beings, then that merit will lead you to Buddhahood one day. The time for our enlightenment is not fixed. It will depend on the kind of motivation you have, the effort, the amount of effort you put in. So it's not like predestined that you will become enlightened in this, after such and such period of time. It's not like that.
I wanted to ask about the quality of being able to resist truth. What does that mean? Like, if you could elaborate.
Okay, this is kind of a really abstract and, vague. At the moment, it will sound really abstract and vague. If you can, a person who has realized the truth becomes really open and not affected by any kind of causes and conditions, adversities for that matter. And according to Shantideva, in the first chapter it says that even if the bodhisattvas, the enlightened bodhisattvas, encounter or go through difficult times, instead of these difficult times, adversities becoming obstacles, they become a fuel that, how to say, increases your bodhicitta, increases your compassion, increases your wisdom. So it blazes your wisdom further, your good qualities, positive qualities further. But I think it is a bit abstract before we have actually experienced that. At the moment, we have to just kind of guess, so to speak, and keep our confidence alive.
Kanula, one last question before we take a break. From the last session, you spoke about 8 types of practice for sowing the seeds of bodhicitta. You had mentioned offerings, then you spoke about offerings, then there was prostrations, there was taking refuge, there was confessing, and I think 5th one was rejoicing. So I missed out on the other 3.
The 6th one is requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, requesting to teach, basically, teach the Dharma. 7th is requesting the Buddhas not to enter into nirvana. Nirvana means cessation, where activity stops. Cessation means activity stops. So in order to benefit other beings, you have this continuous activity. You need to have that continuous activity. So requesting them to live long, basically. So basically what is happening here is the Buddha has already passed into nirvana anyway. But when you do that, what happens? It creates that condition that the Buddha's teaching will remain long for a long period of time. And then people can benefit from there. Then the last one is dedication, which is the most important thing. Dedication of merit. Yeah, these are the 3. 8.